for our licensing conversion. Thank you.
I think your matters has been heard and you will be considered. Thank you.
Okay.
Ali Omar.
I have a question. It's here.
You know, we had agreed that side we finish and then we come this side. I recognized Opot raised his hand later. You handed the mic back and said your question is not related.
It's not related.
You see, we are at 11 o'clock. We are not moving. Some of the questions we are asking are procedural questions of problems we have with the system. They have nothing to do with the draft regulations. If we do not get our act together as aviators, we will get confused. Can we focus? Regulation number this is the problem. If I ask about a problem I have with CAA here, it will not be sorted. But we can get the indulgence of the DG and organize for a session we can fix issues that are bothering the industry. So I know Mr. Pot, Engineer Pot is waiting. Let me take the two questions at the back, come to this front bench and then back that side. Please, let's be orderly.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Maureen from Renegade Air. I have a quick question in regards to eligibility requirements for the cabin crew members. So this is Regulation 137, Part C, which says, of course, with all those requirements, again, have completed an approved course of training conducted by an ATO. My concern here is that most of these cabin crew are recruited into the operator system. So most operators have internal training requirements. They don't necessarily need to have gone to the ATO. So I'd request a consideration for that to include that they can also have an operator's in-house program to that.
Okay, I understand it's Maureen. Maureen Maitai or somebody else? We expect that question. And before I continue to announce the presence of our DG, the presence is around. Now, the concept of PAIR regulations have been extracted from Annex 6, Chapter 12. Annex 6, Chapter 12, that's where cabin crew is all mentioned. But before we move on, I would ask my colleague, Mary Kai, Manager, Flight Ops, to give some input on that concept of cabin crew licenses. Thank you. Cabin crew certificates, not license.
Miss.
Thank you, Manager Pell. As we said, it's something that we have been working on. The problem that we are facing with the industry is, we know with the ATOs, you go for a certain number of months, and there are so many things you're being trained on. While some AOC operators want to bring a fresh person, train them for 2 weeks and put them in an aircraft. Because at the end of the day, cabin crew is about safety. So we are going to relook the whole thing and the syllabus. We are not saying an AOC cannot train the cabin crew, but you have to come and give us your proper training syllabus. We don't have a problem you taking a cabin crew who has been trained and then you convert them to your particular aircraft. Those are two different things. Thank you.
Miss, allow me to weigh in on the same issue. I would want to agree with the comments that are in the matrix on the issue for cabin crew. Looking at the previous regulation, it wasn't complete, and the comments now in the matrix are in consultation with flight operation, the training of cabin crew should be anchored in an approved training program environment, which I agree with. So my suggestion were, for item C on regulation 137, have completed an approved course of training. We agree that the ATO has an approved course of training, and the operator also has an approved training program in Part D. So I was proposing we add have completed an approved course of training conducted by an operator or an approved training organization, because it satisfies the comments of the inspectors.
I think we are speaking the same language. I said before, as from an AOC perspective, we bring for us a syllabus that we will go through with it and we will look at it. We're going to sit down, flight ops and licensing to sort it out, because at the end of the day, the license is a PEL function. It's not an AOC function.
I agree. Allow me to comment and to differ. Our training programs are not 2 weeks courses, and that is what we've been operating with, and they are very robust, and I would like to commend the inspectors have sat in and observed. They are not 2 weeks. I don't know if other operators can comment also on this issue before it becomes law, then it sidelines the other operators who are doing the right thing.
Thank you. My name is Joseph again, representing the Kenya Airline Flight Dispatchers Association. Bwana Mushemi, maybe I could request if you could project the regulations as we take you through the issues we noted as a number of 400 dispatchers. Okay, thank you. Yesterday, I raised the query of the interpretation and definition of the Flight Operations Officer and Flight Dispatcher missing in a number of regulations. And I were pushed to accept that it's been incorporated in the Personnel Licensing Regulations Draft 2022. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's missing. And in the previous regulations, it also was incorrect because it was highlighting that an operator can use a dispatcher or cannot. It had an or in the definition, and we also had an issue with that. But unfortunately, this time, the interpretation and definition is completely missing. So you can just check the interpretation section. It's completely missing. Apart from that, the definitions of other technical officers who fall under the personnel licensing regulations, the definitions are missing as well. So that was a note. I would like to request that the definition be included. To read means a licensed and suitably qualified person designated by the operator to engage in the control and supervision of flight operations in accordance with civil aviation personnel licensing regulations, who supports, briefs, and or assists the pilot in command in the safe conduct of the flight. So that was the interpretation section. If we move ahead to Regulation 8, the Flight Operations Officer license is also missing. It only includes the pilot license, air traffic controller license, flight engineer license, flight radio telephony operator license. Flight Operations Officer license is missing, and they're required to speak and understand the English language. So we're requesting that could also be included. If you go to Regulation 15, it was the view of all the dispatches I've mentioned, that there be included an age limit for FOs, being that an FO does the same, or rather has the same responsibility to a PIC. They share the same responsibility. The age limit should be included to include 65 years of age. That is the view of dispatchers. Currently, there's no age limit, and it's unfortunate because it's a safety-sensitive qualification, and 65 years of age is, we find it appropriate to align with the air transport pilot's license. If you move on to Regulation 21, It's highlighted conversion of all other licenses. The FO conversion process is missing. Going on to Regulation 119, Subpart C, there's a typo that needs to be rectified. That's Regulation 119. Regulation 121, and it reads, subject to compliance to the requirements set forth in these regulations, the privileges of a holder of a flight operations officer license shall be to serve in that capacity with responsibility for each area for which the applicant meets the requirements specified in the Civil Aviation Operation of Aircraft Regulations. Again, the highlighted text is vague because operation of aircraft regulations do not highlight the requirements the applicant must meet. And so we are requesting if the privileges of the license could be incorporated into the personnel licensing regulations as all other licenses have been listed. That's Regulation 121. The privileges are missing. Regulation 122, there's a renewal period that's been listed, so you need to meet those requirements. However, it is in our view that just like the aircraft maintenance engineers, it does not make sense. If you lose your job, you cannot apply for another job because your license is expired. You'd have to go to an operator, get experience, then come in to apply for a renewal of your license. It is unfortunate. That same regulation, we are requesting your consideration to include the FOs who are actually operating outside the country.
We had agreed to limit our questions to 2 minutes. Most of what you're making are comments. Can we go to straight submissions?
Sorry, I'm highlighting some regulations, the various regulations. Our comments are not incorporated, that's why I'm highlighting them. I'm requesting the view. So the last ones is Regulation 132 and 134. If you notice, the radio operations, it is very confusing. It is either FOs, you strike out the requirement to have the FO to have a radio telephony license because they do not operate radio on board an aircraft, or you include a section that reads that an operator, a flight operations officer operates a radio in an operation control center. So right now it just mentions about the aircraft. We do not operate any radio on board the aircraft. We just operate in an operational control center. So those are our comments.
Thank you. On the definition of an FO, there are some terms that are taken as exact as they mean. For example, the ICAO document does not define who a pilot is. So the statement that a flight operations officer stroke dispatch is as straight as it appears. And that's why even the annex itself is not defining it. We will look into that, however. You've talked about no conversion for FO. It is not addressed anywhere in both Annex 1 and the Doc 9379. And that is why there is no process for conversion of FO. I have seen the typo in 119, and we will look at that. On the age limit, our submission will be that we cannot create something to put an age limit which has not been put by ICAO. We will be unfair trying to say that a dispatcher can be up to a maximum of 65, and it is not anywhere in the ICAO document. We don't want to bring laws that support one person as a younger person and probably limit another person as an older person, yet they are not defined anywhere by ICAO. On the FOs working out of the country, please remember that these regulations are made for Kenya license holders, Kenya registered aircraft. So when we start talking about persons who are working in another country, then we will have to run all over and talk about one in this country and one in this country. These regulations are made for holders of our licenses. And any other part that we are not talking about our license, we talk about conversion. Then we have invited that person for or rather that person, there is an invitation in the regulation for conversion. The acting director of safety has asked me that you make the submissions through the given email so that we are able to receive them. There is nowhere that rather so far we have not received those submissions, but please make them on the provided email. Thank you.
I'll take his comment, then comments from this table. I don't know if Engineer Port, you still have comments. And then the last comment will come from the back from Captain Jeroge. I think we really have to get going. It is now 11:20. We've not had tea break. We have about 22 regulations to go. So we have to make a decision whether we are moving or we are not moving. It's not about just pushing forward, but we need to really get some substance into what we are doing. Please, let's carry on.
I would like to, my comments goes to Manager Pell and Mary. The reason why the question was raised in regards to 137C is because we have approved in-house instructors training cabin crews. So we feel like 137C is restricting us to ATO, and that is why we're raising that one. Please, we kindly request that you look into it, at least you add an in-house training, because we have approved one from KCAA.
Mushemi, kindly project Regulation 26, please. Is it connected? Possibly the matrix. The matrix would be. Okay, Mushemi, thank you, and the manager Pell for considering to remove this from the draft regulations and moving it back to the TGMs. Unfortunately, our problem has not been solved. In fact, it has made it even worse because we cannot interrogate the TGMs. And therefore, because we had brought it here, we suggest we keep it here, but address our concerns. And the difficulty we had with this is our students are having serious challenges passing the KCAA exams. And even worse, they can only get a credit transfer if they pass 50% of the papers they sit for. For instance, the PPL, they do up to about 8 papers. And now, the rule in place at the moment, the TGM that you now wanted to make a regulation, is said that if they don't pass 4, anything below that is treated as null and void. And therefore, what we requested of the authority is that every pass, whether one or all, should be treated as a pass and a credit transfer given on the same. And we made examples of how this is done, even among lawyers when they go to the Kenya School of Law and they sit for the bar exams. I'm told there are 9. If they pass 1, it is counted as a pass and they receive the 8. Further afield in the industry, in South Africa, it is said that students can sit for 1 paper at a time, yet it counts. And therefore, because of that pain that our students are going through, we felt this is not a friendly regulation. Today a student will come, will pass 3 papers. It is null and void. Tomorrow they come, they fail what they had passed in the past, and they pass another 3. And they're again back to square 0. So we found this a bit unfortunate. And it is in that regard that we said, let us address this problem, because you brought it as part of the draft regulation, fortunately enough. And therefore, we wouldn't want you to take it back to the TGM because it will still apply. We are better off addressing it here, now, and then. So that way, we resolve this matter once and for all, because it is bothering our students. And in fact, I'm told these exams are not only unique to pilots. Even engineers have had problems to the point where they go and sit exams in EASA and come with B licenses, only to still have challenges passing the local exams. So it's a big problem. We have had in the past students coming from overseas, US, South Africa. Because they can't pass the KCAA conversion exams, they will go and do it in Tanzania, come with a Tanzanian license, and only do an air law paper. So it is a challenge that has been there for a long time. And therefore, we feel that it is best that we address it here, rather than taking it back to the TGMs, which will still apply. That way, we will not have solved this problem. So it is in that regard that we kindly ask of you that we resolve this matter once and for all and avoid postponing it for a later date when an amicable position will be reached. I think that should be reached here because we are all here and we are blessed to have the DG gracing the occasion. So really, we do not need to look any further. Thank you, and I think there are very senior members who really want to ventilate on the same. I think it's only fair that I give them a chance.
Since we are a team, it's good we finish all of us, then we give you to respond at the end. Colonel, thank you very much. Muchema, I think you are smart in that you don't want to put in the regulations, but now you want it to remain in the TGM. I think that's very smart of you. But we are not taking it, we are not buying it. I think the manager personnel is very good at quoting for us if something is in the annex, is a standard, or if it is the TGM. I haven't had any of those, which means it is not in any of those. Whoever came up with a 50% partial pass was good as us coming up with any pass will do. It was an opinion. We kindly request that what the Colonel has said is taken into consideration. And we are not backing down on this. Thank you very much. And we have submitted this before we even started the public participation. We have been to the DG's office with our submissions on the same when it was in the TGM. Thank you very much.
Upande ule na upande huu. Hii inauma. inauma sana. And Mr. Coordinator, Mr. Director here, if you solve this problem, this one, Regulation 26 for AATO, kutoka leo, we will not be calling you Kenya Commission Against Aviation. We'll go back to Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Why do we, the service providers, why do you call you Kenya Commission Against Aviation? Because operator akija kwenu, unataka hii, the first answer he gets is no, forget it. It's not possible. But since yesterday the DG was here, Captain Kibe, he has set a new tone. By the time we leave today, we will not use that word again. Tutakuwa pamoja. Now, history of this thing. When you guys were doing the exams, you were very good. Our students used to get 90, 100%. When you gave us to Kasoa, you did not take them to school. And personal licensing manager knows. Unakuta kwenye PPL, iko exams za helicopters. And the students are doing fixed wing. Unakuta exam ya ATPL kwenye PPL. We have spent time coming to you to get rid of all this, and I must thank you. You have done your best. Ule jamaa anatokaga Entebbe, anakuja, ana clean your system. But it's not perfect. So when the system is not perfect, nyinyi mlikutana, wewe mchami mlisema mlikutana pale, you didn't call us, mkasema ile ilikuwa hapo mbeleni 50% inatosha. No, haitoshi. Mwanafunzi akipita hiyo subject amepita. That's all we are begging. Thank you.
Yes, I have comments regarding number 27 of the intervention matrix. It says sign a maintenance release to, and then follows up with completed satisfactorily in accordance with the applicable standards. I prefer that to be in accordance with OEM standards, original equipment manufacturer standards. Then when we come to number 32, which talks about regulation number 7, and the authority may issue the following classes for aviation repair specialists. We always talk about engine splits, and if you just put propellers there, I feel that we need to have it as aircraft engines, which includes turboshaft, turbojet, turboprop, and piston engines, to be more specific, rather than just saying propeller. Of course, propellers have higher efficiency, but we can't just restrict it to propellers, because we have helicopters which uses the turboshaft engine, and therefore that needs to be changed. And then the second part is you are calling an aviation repair specialist to repair a computer. That to me is a bit underhanded. Maybe we can say repairing avionics systems. So that was one. And then finally it comes to 50, where now we come to the physics of things. An applicant for conversion, those are already stipulated, but comes to part number 4, which talks about a composite exam containing human performance, natural science, aircraft general knowledge, aircraft engineering, aircraft maintenance. I have a bit of a problem with this, and I'll suggest a recommendation. Instead of saying composite exam containing human performance, I would like to suggest human factors. And then natural science, I would really go for physics here, because physics drives fluid mechanics, the governing equations of fluid dynamics, which are heavier than aircraft flies through. That physics, the crux of it, is physics. Chemistry is also physics, right? I hope so. And then comes aircraft general knowledge. To me, I would like to replace this with basic aeronautics, rather than just saying aircraft general knowledge, and then aircraft engineering. That is a very broad topic. That is like a degree program. To me, aircraft engineering should be aircraft aerodynamics, propulsion, and or aircraft aerodynamics and performance, such that when the students comes from the exam, they know exactly what they are taking, rather than saying aircraft engineering, which can even cover things like structures and all airframes and all these other things, even dynamic systems. So we need to be careful about that. Aircraft maintenance is well put. So those are the things I noticed that require a bit of adjustment, especially when the exam, and especially natural science, to be replaced with physics. That is what I feel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mine is very direct to Regulation 127, Sub-Regulation 6. You did not? Oh, I thought you were coming to sanitize. I understand this was brought in on the requests made earlier on that we didn't have qualifications for this cadre of people. I think they are called aircraft special, don't know. Repair specialist, yes. It's good. Now, at least we've got qualifications put there. The only thing that we need to think very further, a little further, is who is going to standardize these qualifications? At the moment, it seems like of course, it is left to the AMO or operator. Do we really think, and this is something that we must really think, do we think this will maintain the same standards as those people who are licensed, who are vetted by the authority? Is it going to be the same standard, or are we going to have checkered standards depending on which AMO and which organization it is? Then again, Mr. Moderator, I do appreciate your frustration with the time, but please let's not at the expediency of time, cut out some people. Some people are feeling that they are being ignored, and probably it's only people like me who are being listened to. That's not the case, and it should not be the case. A very good example was that one of cabin and training of cabin crew. I think that needs to be looked at very carefully, because organizations through their Part D can be approved as trainers, and I think the manager had said so. So all we needed to do to that regulation is just to put "or," and it's very simple. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Njoroge, Director Operations at Kenya Airways. And this I'm submitting to PEL based on what we submitted in June 2013 in writing on validity of medicals. That is on Regulation 9. And this has not been captured in your matrix of items submitted by the stakeholder. The items we submitted are: 1, validity of a CPL and ATPL for those over 40 years. According to ICAO Annex 1, 1.2.5.2.2, which were highlighted and given to you in writing. Validity of both ATPL and CPL is 1 year and not 6 months. That's a standard as per ICAO, yet we have chosen to keep it to 6 months. However, this is for multi-crew operated aircrafts. For single crew operated aircrafts, helicopters, operating commercial aviation, then it is 6 months. We did even give a proposal on the write-up. According to ICAO Annex, this has not been considered. So we request that you go back to the standard Annex 1 and look at this, and also look at for multi-crew for multi-crew aircrafts on the 60th birthday, it should be every 6 months. These were not considered, so for yourselves to consider and get back to the stakeholders. Now, this one goes to the DG Direct. Again, on the same regulation, PEL number 9, and this is a good thing, which is, so number 9.9, it says that we will submit our medicals within 45 days, and the expiry of your license shall be based on your anniversary of your previous renewal if the medical is done within 45 days. However, Kenya still remains one of the few countries whereby we have to keep on coming to KCAA to renew our license. Other jurisdictions give a license nearly for a lifetime, and then you renew your medical, which is submitted to KCAA. We need not be coming to KCAA every year to give you this. We can pay for the medical, and we can pay for renewal of the license so that you don't lose revenue online. Give us a small license. DG, I'm asking this one from you. A small license like all other countries, and all we need is a medical. The reason I say this is because when we do the medical 45 days to the renewal or to the anniversary, when I'm in a different jurisdiction, if you're in the US or you're in the Europe, they will check the validity of your license and validity of your medical. So if your medical is expired, they will deem your license to be expired. So our crew have to keep on doing the medicals earlier every year, losing out on man hours. So that is a request to the DG Direct, but the other one is on standard, and we request that you review the standard on the annex so that you can you can change it on the KCAS that we are discussing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Njoroge. We'll take one more question from the gentleman, and then we'll allow the panel to respond.
Good morning. Gishuki from Traffic. This question has been on the floor since we started discussing 2018 and 2021 and 2022 now. It involves the complication of what is called overlap of responsibility. It's going to cover the entire rating of an AMEL license. And we've been promised over and over again that this is going to be dealt with, especially when specifically it was put in a document called aircraft notices, which I don't know where it went. We are having version, volume, edition, I think 2010 or maybe earlier than that, which is actually today very irrelevant. We complained about the content of that document because somebody went into that document and messed with the document. There's something called privileges of the C license and A license. And our engineers here will agree, this is not a debate anymore, that the privileges, most of the privileges of overlap were supposed to be given to the A license. Instead, on that document, they were removed from the A license and they retained the C license. An engine is a hookup on a frame. So the only thing they could be able to have an overlap, maybe checking the gauges or something. But now, the person who owns the aircraft, the airframe person, doesn't have any privileges as far as that document is concerned. Now, when rubber touches the road, and on behalf of all the operators here, I think I've worked for most of them, Captain Ririani and others, we are frustrated. I agree with Major Nyanjui when he says we have one chopper in Juba, for example. You want me to put an A license, a C license, and an avionics license, a radio catex. You want me to have 5 engineers online at Juba to serve one chopper. Ilihali, we would have this guy had given privileges by overlap to be able to work on the systems and maybe release the aircraft. Now, we still don't address what is called line or release, I don't know, transit training, transit maintenance training, or line maintenance training. I don't think it's anywhere in our schools. And we were using the overlap of responsibilities to have a guy given limited authorization, maybe to remove a box, a COM box, and replace it and do a functional check. If he doesn't have to do the functional check, give it to the pilot. All he needed to do is secure the box back, replace number 1 or number 2 box, and then give it to the pilot. He does a functional check, and both of you release the aircraft to continue working in Juba until the aircraft comes back to base. We are having a problem when inspectors from airworthiness or flight ops come to Kalemi, or go to Bangui, or come to Conakry. I can't put 5 engineers at Conakry with 1900. It's impossible. But I know we have violated. We are not in compliance as far as that base is concerned. Now, when the inspector comes he says, who is going to release Cat X? And who does radio here? And I keep quiet because they know as much as I do that this is impossible. But then quietly, they get back to Nairobi and give me a certification, and the matter is put to rest. It's an illegality that has been put to rest for very many years. If we don't do something about overlap of responsibilities, then all our line stations are illegal, including KQ line stations outside Nairobi, because they don't have the manpower enough to be able to clear all the categories of the license. And it's not necessary, in fact. So if we don't have that answer by the end of today, I think there's something called Madege, haki yetu. We come to KCAA and park there outside and sleep like Orengo, Bonadiji, and wait for you to give us a go-ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can get responses.
Okay, thank you very much for the input from the industry. We have listened to you. We are going to do what we can, and when we can't, we are going to communicate. The issue of CMC, we are going to redraft the regulation so that both the operator, so long as they meet certain requirements, can also be accommodated in coordination with the flight operations. And I say again, kindly refer to chapter 12 of Annex 6. It deals with that. There was also the issue of, that was raised on the issue of flight operation officer or dispatch. If you go to Annex 1, page 25, it says the types of licenses to be issued. It mentions crew licenses and other licenses other than crew. Flight operations officer is not a crew license. The way AML is not a crew license or air traffic control officer or a specialist, repair specialist, including the aeronautical station operator. Now, somebody mentioned about pregnancy. It is covered under 6.3.2.2.1 in Annex 1. And that one has been addressed in that category. On the issue of examinations, a partial pass, we discussed the issue in length some times back. And there's an issue that I raised on what you call the level of accomplishment and the factors that determine corporate competence-based training, where you are talking about SKS, skills, knowledge, and attitudes, and at what period are they supposed to go together. I raised that issue when we were here, and I said it was a food for thought, and I also brought the issue of what you call knowledge management, including what you call the decay of knowledge. So that we need to sit down with the approved training organizations and sort this issue once and for all. So that at the end of the day, if we have to give you every paper that has been passed, then how long are you supposed to complete the examination? For example, it's a PPL. So that the concept of decay theory, which I will talk in length when you have a meeting, we are able now to go through and we say the pros and cons of that, so that we address that with, once and for all, with the blessings of the DG. So that one we are going to look into. And then the other issue on, still on flight operations officer, there's something they call flight following. And if you're managing air navigation radios, you need a license. If you have to do flight following, you need a license. You have to communicate with the air traffic control or to flight crew, you need a license. You cannot tell us that in the process you don't need a license. Now, another issue that was mentioned is guided by ICAO Annex 1, Chapter 2, 2.1.10 on limitations of curtailment and limitations of privileges of pilots who have attained their 60th birthday, and also attainment of privileges of pilots who have attained the age of 65 years. Now, a flight operations officer does not go for medical checkup every year. And most of the times you're going to find crew licenses are based on their availability to pass either class 1, class 2 medicals. And therefore some of those issues have been addressed by the law. And the way my colleagues said, whatever has not been either in the annex or in statutory requirements cannot be purported to be included in the law. So some of those issues that have been mentioned, the ones that I'm able to remember, we'll be able to look back and address them where we can, and if it's not possible, depending on the reasons, if there are genuine reasons that we are not able to address, then it would be appropriate for us to be able to communicate so that at the end of the day, the issue is addressed once and for all. Now, medical certificates. We know what the annex says on the concept of validity of medicals, include multi-crew or single crew. But also, let us go back and look at the guidelines that have been given us by Doc 8984 on the concept of medicals. And the reasons why, even when you pass, you get a class 1, and you are less than 40 years, the doctor can still give you 6 months, depending on the evaluation. All those guidelines have been put there in place, but there is some history on how, when the annex was changed sometimes in 20, we were not able to implement by then. By that time, I was in ATC, I was also raising the same issue, but it's something that we are going to look into and see whether the reasons that were given by then are still valid today. And so that we address it once for as far as main costs are concerned for both mod crew and the single crew ATPL, and as well as CPL. And also it affects air traffic control class 3 main costs. So that's the best I can, for the time being, give a response. We've been taking your notes, and we are going to ensure that we look into all that. And perhaps once we take a break, and there are more issues to be raised as far as lessons concerned, we could be available for you, even if it's one of the private rooms around. You articulate all those issues that you have, and then we are going to look into them, take a catalog, and address them as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, I have about 3 concerns from the floor. That's regarding to engineers, and one of them is from Fred Opot, that's Regulation 127, and the qualifications that have been stipulated there with regard to specialized services for the people who will be approved to release to service some of these specialized services offered by AMOs. So I think from where I sit, there is a document currently, an aircraft notice, talking only about NDT. So in this particular notice, we are amending it to include all other specialized services mentioned by ICAO in ICAO Doc 9760, Chapter 10. ICAO is very explicit, and we cannot put this in the regulation, but we can only mention what are these specialized services that we expect. So we are amending the notice. And then for Professor, there was a concern about human factor, the natural science, being called physics and others. But what we have done is taken this word verbatim from Annex 1, Chapter 4.2.1.2. And we have copied as is, as a standard. And ICAO has gone ahead to define what each title stands for. So for natural sciences, they have talked about the physics and the chemistry requirements, and all the others that have been listed there, which I cannot read one by one. Then for Mr. Gishuki, concern about the notice currently. This aircraft notice was 2005. It included overlap of responsibility given to an AC-rated licensed engineer. But I think when amendments were done in 2009, they deleted the whole chapter on overlap of responsibility. So again, we have recognized that, and this is a document we are currently working on. We will share with you once we finish amending it. But as you say, we want to demystify. Maybe you can look at the current approvals we've issued. It's not contrary to the regulations. Maybe when you go back. So KCAA has not approved light stations that are not meeting the standards. My DG here will kill me after this. So please go look at your approval that you have currently. There is no violation. And if you have, please return, because there is none. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make a proposal, because we are really constrained on time. We've not had our tea break, but I'd like to make a proposal. We take 5 minutes to pick tea, then reconvene and continue with the session, even as you take your tea. That will allow us to save a few more minutes. So if we can have a 5-minute session, get tea, come in, and then we will look at the airworthiness regulations, which is a carryover from yesterday, and then proceed with the regulations relating to aeronautical telecommunication.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of Ask Your Aviator series. My name is Christopher Igala Kigalo, a Senior Air Transport Officer at Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Today on Ask Your Aviator series, we are going to take you through one of the functions of the Civil Aviation Authority, which involves facilitation of air transport. In facilitation of air transport as provided internationally by International Civil Aviation Organization and KCAA as the oversight body in Kenya, we have to ensure that passengers and shippers are properly facilitated at the airport. In doing this, we involve several agencies, both public and private. An example of agencies in the private sector includes the airlines, ground handling agencies, catering services, taxi services, and financial institutions. Public bodies involve Kenya Revenue Authority, Customs Department, Immigration Department. We have the Plant Health Inspectorate Department, Directorate of Livestock, the Nuclear Authority, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, among others. So all these agencies have to coordinate in order to facilitate a passenger. So join me today as we go through the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to show you how an international passenger is facilitated on departure and the seamless coordination between all the agencies. Thank you, and let's start our journey. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning to you. We are here today going through the airport. You may introduce yourself and tell us who you are, the organization you work for, and the role you play at the airport.
My name is Benjamin Murkomen. I'm the head of Hotel Services, KCAA. And the key role that we do as Hotel Services is to ensure that we put in place preventative measures in case of any emergency here at the airport, and ensure that we attend to those medical emergencies as soon as possible without interfering with travel and business in this airport.
How do you handle, on a normal day, how do you handle passengers who pass through your point of operation?
As you can see, we are now here at the Terminal 1A. We have new procedures based on the new protocols of COVID-19. Yes. Number one, before a traveler exits through our airport, we must screen them based on the PCR certificate that they're presenting here at the counter. And I have my officers here who are ready to receive our travelers. Yes. So what happens, the passenger arrives, he presents or she presents our certificates from approved laboratories in Kenya. We have 43 approved labs that test COVID-19 certificates. So once they present themselves here, we verify the certificates that they present. We have a trusted traveler's code that they must look at those certificates. We have a digital system that is linked to the laboratory. So once a traveler comes, they present a TT code in soft copy or in hard copy. And then we check very fast based on the Banner Bio system that we have, whether it is a genuine one or not. Once they enter into the tablet, it will produce the certificate and we'll compare with your passport and the document that was presented from the lab. When it matches, we'll release you, you continue with your journey.
There's a much difference between the operations now and before COVID-19. Can you simply explain to us the differences that you have now and how you are doing things before COVID came around?
Absolutely. We have new, and the new norm is we must sanitize our hands, social distance the way we are now.
I hope this is more than
1.5 meters. Yes. And ensure that you are tested before you travel, because we want to ensure that the risk of COVID-19 is reduced as you travel. That is why we are here screening before they go to the main terminal, so that at least we are sure that those who are traveling have been screened and they have the right documentation before they do that. So they have to arrive here early as opposed to the times when we are not having COVID-19.
Now, we already have a vaccine that arrived in Kenya recently. After Kenyans have been vaccinated and the whole world vaccination has taken place, how different will it be to travel between now and after we've gotten the vaccine?
As a country, we are really excited that we have now this vaccine that we're going to use for our frontline health workers. The vaccine is part of preventative measures. What will happen now is that it will give our travelers that confidence that at least they are being given a preventative measure, so that at least they are aware that when there is the virus is there, it will reduce the risk of the virulence of that virus. So what will happen now is that my front health workers will get the inoculation, and we'll go to the general public. And after that now, what will happen to this traveler is that there will be that confidence, because it will give the traveler that confidence that they have a preventative measure in themselves. It will give them immunity for a certain period of time. But that means also we will not leave the other precautionary measures. They must observe social distance, put on the masks, and ensure that they sanitize and wash their hands as they travel through our airport.
Now, Mr. Murkomen, in case a passenger appears showing symptoms of COVID-19, what action will you take as public health?
Yeah, in our protocols, once you have a case of COVID-19 positive case arriving, what will happen is that we have to isolate that person. We have an isolation facility in this airport. Number two, we fill a form that shows that this person presented himself or herself with a positive certificate. Then we contact our counterparts in Nairobi Metropolitan Services, whereby they will come and pick this person for further management. So we will not allow anybody presenting himself or herself to travel with a positive certificate, because we don't know whether it's a true positive or a negative. So we must confirm by ensuring that that person is returned back for further management and for further testing, so that we are sure that once they travel, they are truly negative.
Thank you very much. Final one, having worked at JKIA, we know the vaccine came through the airport the other day. Were you part of the team that received the vaccine?
Yes. As a portal officer in charge of this airport, I received the team, the CS who came to receive the vaccines. And it was a very good day, because as a country, we know now we have a vaccine that will protect the citizens and our travelers who are in this country. So very soon we'll be inoculating our frontline health workers, the police, the KCAA frontline team, and the people who are in this airport, because we are all receiving travelers. So we are in the front line.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murkomen. We want to continue with our passenger facilitation journey. We are now headed to KCAA. We are entering the airport itself. We are going to see how the passenger is going to be facilitated through other facilities within the airport. We continue with our journey. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, madam.
How are you?
I'm very fine. How are you today?
Fine.
Yes.
You're welcome to KCAA.
Thank you. I would wish you introduce yourself, and you tell us which organization you work for.
Okay. My name is Dorcas Chemo. I work for Kenya Airports Authority as a Senior Operations Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chemo.
Yes.
Tell us in short,
yes,
what's the role of Kenya Airports Authority?
Okay, in a nutshell, Kenya Airports Authority is the airport operator. It is mandated to administer, control, and manage airports, civilian airports in the country.
So you manage all airports within the country?
Yes, within the country.
Including where we are, Jomo Kenyatta International
Including Jomo Kenyatta International Airport.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I want you to explain to the public, how do you facilitate our passengers here at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport?
Okay.
Yes.
Kenya Airports Authority being the airport operator, we have several airports. This is being our main airport. Yes. We provide facilitative infrastructure for aviation services. Yes, and the aviation services, of course, include the airlines, catering services, government agencies, because as an airport operator, we cannot achieve facilitation of passengers minus all those organizations that support us into delivering customer satisfaction in our airports. Yes.
Thank you. What are some of the agencies that are involved in the passenger journey within the airport?
There are several agencies that are involved. One of them is immigration. We have customs. We have port health. We have other government agencies like anti-narcotics, security agencies like the police, who help us ensure that security on the land side is okay. And many other agencies like even taxi drivers, like passenger facilitation begins at home.
Yes.
Even transporters from the city to airport are all lumped together to deliver customer experience in airports. Yes.
So in essence, you are the landlord of everybody else who works within the airport.
Exactly, we are
From the airline to all government agencies.
Completely, yes, we are.
Thank you very much, Madam Chemo. Now, to our viewers, I would like to remind you to listen keenly and engage us, because we are going to give away gift bags to people who respond to our questions correctly. And our first question for the day: do you know the difference between Kenya Airports Authority and Kenya Civil Aviation Authority? Remember to follow us on our social media handles and engage us. And now, Madam Dorcas, we can see so many gadgets here. Can you explain to us the process of now facilitating the passenger?
Thank you, I'll gladly do it.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
This is our initial security checkpoint.
Yes.
Where a passenger comes.
Yes.
We have our security officers waiting upon you.
Yes.
As a customer comes, they are required to remove their shoes
Yes.
when they get here. Remove all the metallic items that they have. If they have a computer,
Yes.
they have to remove and place it in a different tray.
Yes.
And then it will now go through the process
Yes.
of security. Yes, and you can see from our left we have prohibited items that you are not supposed to travel with.
Okay.
And because of this COVID era now, make sure that you sanitize all this immediately after use. Now this one is a walk-through machine. In case you have anything that is not required,
Yes.
metallic or whatever, it will beep. And then the officer on the other side
Yes.
will do a special search. After the items have gone through the X-ray machine,
Yes.
and in case there is any dutable item that has been identified, we normally have our customs partners on standby to check on the items that are dutable. Yes.
So the next step from here is the customs department.
Exactly, that is now where we are going to.
Can you take us please to the customs department?
Let's go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, hello sir.
Yes, sir.
Would you wish to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, the organization you work for, and what you do.
Thank you very much. I'm Robert Kirere, Head of Customs at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, passenger terminals. Customs, we play a major role at the departure. We do enforce the customs law, the various acts or other laws, and various conventions. And we do that jointly with the other security agencies at the airport. We work with Kenya Airports Authority, security agencies. We work with the police. We work with the intelligence services. And basically we are doing that to protect our border. We are doing that for us to be able not to check the smuggling of illegal wildlife trade, the products like ivory, bulk cash smuggling. We do that to check on smuggling of high-value goods which could be taken out of the country. That include gold. Basically, we are here as a border control agent to ensure that no smuggling activities happens in our airport.
Now, if I'm a passenger traveling out of the country, how would you handle me?
When you come in as a passenger, you would find customs at the checkpoints working with Kenya Airports Authority just to check on what you have in your bags and what you're supposed to declare. And if you have any items that you're supposed to declare to customs, at that point you're supposed to make that declaration to the customs agent who will be present at the departure points.
And can you give an example of the items that is a mandatory that you have to declare?
Yes, all restricted items that are being taken out of the country should be declared. For example, if you are carrying currency more than or equivalent or monetary instrument equivalent to $10,000 US, you are supposed to make that declaration to customs. Our officers who are present at the departure will be there to guide you on how to make that declaration in a monetary instrument declaration form. And then all the items that you intend to bring back into the country should be declared to customs. For example, if you are taking out, say, your professional toolboxes that you are going to use for your work outside the country, you are supposed to declare to customs. If you are taking out jewelry, you are attending a function, you are attending a wedding, you're supposed to declare to customs when you're leaving. If you're going out with your sporting equipments, you are supposed to make that declaration to customs. And when you make that declaration, customs will issue with your importation certificate that you are supposed to keep it, so that when you're coming back into the country, you will declare what you carried out with you, and at that point, we won't charge you taxes, or we won't collect duty on that particular item.
For example, I can see your officers here with a few bags.
The items, that includes currencies, anything more than $10,000 or equivalent.
Now, after we registered our passenger, she's free to go now.
Yes, upon registration and doing the importation certificate, our passenger is allowed to proceed.
Now, Mr. Kirel, when you are screening the bags and you find a passenger, a departing passenger, who has not declared the restricted items, what action do you take? What are the consequences?
Failure to declare restricted items to customs is an offense. This is a customs offense that will be dealt as per the provision of the Act. So we would advise all passengers who are traveling, who are leaving the country, to make sure that they declare all restricted items to customs, so that they avoid facing the penalties and the fines that are provided in the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Now, for our public, keep viewing and take much interest, because the gift bags are still coming. And our next question is, what are the restricted items that you require to declare? And if you don't declare, what are the consequences? Keep following us on our handles and engage us continuously. Now that we are through with customs, Madam Chemo, can you tell us what next?
Okay, thank you. That's a pleasure, highlighting what happens in our facilitation journey. Now we can move on to the airline counters, where the passenger will present their documents to travel. You can do the check-in either self-check with these equipments, or you can go to the counters. In case you are a passenger who is not familiar with self-check-in, there's always an airline official around to assist.
So I can come here and get my boarding pass and board
Yes, yes, please. You can come in, scan your passport,
Yes.
then get your boarding pass, and then you go and drop off your bag. Yes.
Now please take us to the counter check-in for the air.
So after the security check, the passenger now comes to the check-in counter, where he or she will present all the travel documents, passport, ticket, then they are able to check him or her in. The passenger will also drop the check-in bags, and of course they will weigh the hand luggage to see if it is within the
Aviation Surveillance Systems Regulations, the draft Civil Aviation Communication Procedures and Communication Systems Regulations. These relate to Annexes 3 and Annex 10. That should allow us to advance the process fairly fast. So So let us start off. So I invite my colleague Carol Mbiti to just take us through the draft civil aviation regulations on units of measurements to be used in air and ground communication.
Matrix. Good afternoon once more. I'm taking you through units of measurement. This is one of the shortest set of regulations. Apparently, we have very few recommendations from the industry. First part of these regulations, we introduced part 2 of the regulations, which is the applicability, which was missing from the previous regulations. Then regulation number 4, SI units. We realized that we had a wrong reference in regulation number 4, subregulation 1, whereby we had quoted regulation 6 and 7 instead of 5 and 7. In regulation number 7, we deleted part 2 of regulation 7. Then we reintroduced what was initially as regulation number 8. We moved the content of regulation number 8 to regulation 7 part subregulation 1. And that is all we did for that set of regulations. I submit.
So thank you, Caroline, for that portion. Any question on that particular regulation? That is touching on Annex 5 of ICAO, that is units of measurement used in air ground operations. Any comment or question? If not, then we move to another regulation. So my name is David Ondieki, as indicated from yesterday. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for the attention. And this particular session, we look at provisions relating to ICAO Annex 10, that is touching volumes 1 to volume 5, that is radio navigation aids, communication procedures, communication systems, surveillance and collision avoidance systems, and non-core radio frequency spectrum. So basically, this will be able to provide an indication on what comments were able to be received from the industry, the actions that were taken, and also the way forward in terms of the final draft. So this is basically a matrix on the radio navigation aids. I believe my colleagues from the Air Navigation Service Directorate who are within can be able to give specific comments on this particular element. So in terms of the interpretation, or in the interpretation part of the regulation, a comment was basically received from the Air Navigation Services Directorate, specifically the manager AIS, who raised an issue in terms of the use of two terms that were not defined under the interpretation part, that is not confirmation publication and notice to airmen, that is NOTAM. So this was included under regulation 14.4. The regulation under this particular section is periodic inspection, testing, and security of CNS facilities. This particular concern was raised by the manager aviation security in terms of the use of air navigation services and the CNS provider. In this particular case, I think I explained this when we were looking at the certification of air navigation service providers yesterday. We indicated the need of a security program, and this particular provision has been included. Regulation 14.4 says that the CNS provider shall implement the security program for the communication navigation surveillance systems in line with the NSP Security Procedures Manual as required in the Civil Aviation Certification of Air Navigation Services Regulation. So basically it's referencing to the regulation, and this is an extract of that particular regulation that we went through yesterday. So those are the three changes that were submitted to our unit as regards to the Civil Aviation Radio Navigation Aids Regulation 2022. So allow me to go through all the 5 subsections, and then we will take questions at the end. And the radio frequency spectrum utilization, this is basically volume 5 of an extend, that's ICAO, an extend volume 5. The same comments were received in terms of utilization of the interpretation part and applicability of the 2 terms that were excluded. They also included, and also the element of development of the security program. So Regulation 14.4 as applicable and as explained before, under these particular regulations, it was also amended as necessary. And the surveillance, collision, and avoidance system regulations, these basically cover Annex 14, Volume 4. The same provisions were included, and an amendment made on the same regulation, and this also touches on the communication system regulation. So basically, these 5 sets of regulations had a challenge in terms of inclusion of these 2 definitions, and also the provision for the implementation of a security program, which was adequately amended and included. For the point of concern was on the use of the term CNS provider vis-a-vis the NS provider, and the Annex 17 provision require that the ATS provider develops a security program. So this was expanded, or has been expanded, to provide for all the services that are under the air navigation service provider. That is CNS, ATM, AIS, and procedure design as applicable. And communication procedures, this is where a number of comments were received. This is volume 2 of Annex 10. Besides the 2 terms that I've explained, that are not confirmation publication and not notice to airmen, that's NOTAM. We have Regulation 7.1 that deals with inspections and audits. The head of the communication operations unit submitted a proposal so that we can be able to make a change into that and bring on board provisions that touch on the operations part of the service. And hence, Regulation 7.1 was amended, and inspector of the authority shall have unrestricted access to facilities, installations, record documents, and operations of the service provider. So an introduction of the word operations so that it can be able to be encompassing to all the services. In terms of Regulation 8.1, sub-regulation 8.1, is on siting and installation. The proposal is basically to add subsection C, that is 1C, that can be able to provide for the communication operation services. And this particular proposal was accepted, and subsection 8.1C was introduced, where it now currently reads, provide communication operations in accordance with the provisions of this regulation. So basically, this is able to bring on board a service that had been excluded in the initial draft. On the same regulation, Regulation 2, the facilities in the sub-regulation shall be installed by Alliances StartSep. I think in the morning presentation under the personnel licensing, there's an introduction of the licensing part of ATSEPs. So the installation of equipment and operation shall be able to be handled by Alliances StartSeps is a process that is ongoing at the moment. And the authority is transiting to this particular process of licensing engineers who are undertaking the installation and maintenance. At this point in time, I want to mention the operation part of the licensing of the operators is a process that is under consideration by the personnel licensing, but I believe that the aeronautical station operators license that is mentioned in Annex 1 will be considered and a determination given by the personnel licensing in terms of licensing the operators who utilize this equipment. So provisionally, we will have the installation of this equipment by the license StartSeps as that process is ongoing and has been incorporated in the personnel licensing regulations. However, on the operator side, the personnel licensing department will be able to give guidance on this. However, we are in discussion on the same, and consensus will be, and we'll be able to communicate to the provider who requested for this particular amendment. That is the Communication Operations Department. Will be able to give a feedback on the way forward. Under Regulation 14.4, I think I've comprehensively covered this. It affects all the regulations. I cannot repeat that. It's basically development of a security program by the CNS provider that will be able to cover all the three arms, that is the communication, navigation, and surveillance systems in line with the NSP security program as required in the certification and navigation service providers regulations. Regulation 16.1G is an editorial. Basically, instead of making reference to a yearly, the proposal was to use the word annual and CNS personnel training under the requirements. So basically now the regulation is reading, conduct an annual review of the training plan. Initially it was a yearly, so the editorial issue that was proposed was taken on board and accepted by the authority. In terms of acceptance of messages, this was a proposal that was given by the manager AIS, and basically it happens that the CNS provider in this particular service in terms of management of messages, the authority is the regulator and at least the service provider at the moment in terms of provision of services, so there was no need of making this particular change as it's in tandem with the provisions of Annex 10 Volume 2, and hence no change was adopted in terms of these particular regulations as is in tandem with Annex 10 Volume 2. Under Regulation 28, Subregulation 4, there was an editorial request for revision except where special arrangements have been made with this is basically the use of the Article A or D, then an appropriate change was made, and then we accepted to revise the same. It shall be reading, special arrangements have been made with the CNS provider concerned. So that particular change of that particular article was made and appropriately incorporated within that particular regulation. Regulation 29, Sub-Regulation 2, transmission and delivery of messages was brought in by the manager AIS from the service provider. And the comment, a single officer for each aircraft operating area shall be designated. So for purposes of designation and location of this service is done by the CNS provider, so clarification was provided and there was no change to the regulation. In terms of correction of errors during message origination, that's Regulation 50. This particular part, in as much as is contained in the annex, that's Annex 10 Volume 2, we do not have this applicable at the moment, and hence this standard is no longer applicable to us as a country, so we did not incorporate this. Neither did we take on board an amendment of this because it's not contained in our regulation. In terms of regulation 57, 58, and 59, you are all aware, those of us who work with the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, that they are not mobile service. Hence, the PEL department is best suited to handle this. I'm not sure whether the manager personnel not least on the communication system, basically, did not have a significant change. It's the last volume of X10. I did not have a significant change in terms of what we had received from the service provider in terms of the changes. Basically, it's on the two terms that I've spoken about, and also the development of the security program for the CNS department. So the utilization of the terms interchangeably. But as indicated yesterday, we have since migrated this provision to the certification of NSP regulations, and then they cover across board. So that is the end of my submission, and at this point in time, I want to invite any questions and comments, maybe from those who have been affected by this particular 5 regulations, and if there's any clarification that is required, we will be able to give a response. Thank you. Any question or a comment? If not, then yes. Diaga, yes.
Thank you very much for that presentation. For me, I'll say it is really encouraging, with this engagement in that modernization of most of the services which are being provided by different maybe departments within ANS being captured, under just the NSP, because it is the NSP which is certified, and then they are providing all those services under it. It is CNS, it is AIS, ATS, all of them are part of ANS. So I really appreciate that. If we can have that ANSP being certified to provide all those services, it is wonderful in that harmonization. So that is my comment, just a short comment. Thank you.
Thank you, DSN, for that particular comment. I interpret your remarks as being twofold. that all services that are provided by the air navigation services should be consolidated and as captured in the certification of air navigation services regulations, and where applicable, then that service should be provided by the same entity. I think that's where we are migrating. Just an update on the same, we are migrating. Currently, I think we are providing a license to every station, a certificate to every station at the moment, but we are in the process of thinking to having a consolidated document that shall be given to the Director Air Navigation Services for that particular consolidated service provision. And where we have unique applications that are able to address, for example, there's a private operator wants to provide these services, it will be able to be licensed as applicable. So that is in place, but however, the spirit of this particular issue is basically to consolidate the requirements as necessary. Thank you for your comment, Diasen. Anybody else? If not, then we come to the end of this presentation. Richard, I'm not sure whether the search and rescue element is ready. You can take the floor.
Good afternoon again. My name is Richard Cherop, Air Traffic Management and Search and Rescue Inspector at Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. I'm presenting you briefly on the matters on proposed changes to the Civil Aviation Article Search and Rescue Regulations. You know, the Search and Rescue Regulations are categorized into two, where we have the aeronautical and as well as maritime. So our concern as the Civil Aviation Authority, we are concerned with the aeronautical search and rescue regulations, which of course is done in tandem with the maritime, where we are required normally to have a memorandum of understanding on how we can carry out search and rescue activities on the water bodies. So as indicated, as we had indicated in the preamble, we don't need to. There were a few regulations which were affected, and actually the concerns which were raised in the last presentation or on sensitization touched on only on some areas, and these proposals came from the air traffic services, which by Regulation 4 of these Civil Aviation and Search and Rescue regulations are the designated search and rescue agency. The search and rescue regulations are derived from the Annex 11, Annex 12 of the Chicago Convention, and as such, one of the proposals which was done was in Regulation number 4 on the provisions of search and rescue service, and this was done in the proposed text is the same as that on the draft, so we retained what we had, and only it was amended for clarity. The second one was in the interpretation, where we had the designated agency. So this was not changed in that the proposed text interpretation was adopted, where we hoped to have in the regulations, we were to say that there was a requirement that the civil aviation or the state, which is now the civil aviation authority, is to designate an entity or an agency to provide this service. So in that aspect, the Directorate of Air Navigation Services within the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority was tasked through these regulations to be provided for. Actually, to be the agency which is responsible for coordinating on search and rescue activities. And then on Regulation 9 is where we had registrations of ELDs and PLBs. The proposed request was incorporated in the regulations and amended, and that amendment was amended accordingly, and that was Regulation 9, where the proposed aeronautical search and rescue agency shall maintain the national IBRD register. So this is what is, it's normally a register which is available at the, and maintained by the air navigation service provider. On the regulation number 13, there was a request on the entry into the territory of Kenya by parties. These were state parties which were involved or to provide assistance in areas where there was search and rescue, and especially where it also involved some external. This amendment, this was amended for clarity and avoiding reference to the Director General. So there was an initial reference to the Director General. However, it was amended and the regulation, and then it was, instead of where to say that the Director General, it was to be, we should be referring to the search and rescue, also the designated agency, which is, as we say that now, because it can change from time to time, but as for now, and as for these regulations, the designated agency is the aeronautical search, is the Directorate of Air Navigation Services. So there was no change in this text as the proposed interpretation is adopted. So what was proposed in the last consolidated meeting, it was adopted. And the next thing was sub-regulation 2 on other state parties which wish to amend to wish the aeronautical search and rescue units to enter into the territory of Kenya and to carry out the search and rescue. So this, again, there was no change in the text. Proposed interpretation, which was done on the plenary at that time, was taken on board, and as such was adopted. Likewise, to sub-regulation 3, where also there was no change in text as proposed, the interpretation is adopted. On regulation number 21, it is procedures at the scene of accident. There was a recommendation, may be considered to be in the regulation chapter consensus. So this, there was, in the regulations normally we use the mandatory words shall, but in this circumstance, we use the word may. So there was no change in text, and that use of that word was retained, and also to be in compliance with the that standard requirement. Lastly, it was just the transitional provision, which is normally in any law which is being amended. It has to appear, and then the word specified is accepted. Okay, there was the meaning. This means the same. Okay, there was the challenges of using of word specified and prescribed, and this through the drafters and also the legal experts, they say that the use of the word specified instead of prescribed to meet the draft. That is what we finally used, because as we say with the specified, we specified either in a schedule or in any other related regulations which could be applicable. And that brings to the end of the Aeronautical Search and Rescue Regulations 2022. And in a nutshell, all the requirements which were brought on board or which were proposed in the last deliberations had been taken on board, and they were actually as explained therein. I welcome questions if there's any.
I'm very impressed with your presentation. I just wanted to ask you a question about the aeronautical search and rescue regulations. Does it incorporate, for instance, the type of aircraft, example, a helicopter, and the type of equipment that you'd require, for instance, the rappelling equipment in the case of a hazardous situation? Say, if you remember, the Eurocopter had landed on the Everest a while back. Say, again, forest fires. What and how does the licensing criteria also change for a pilot to fly under such adverse conditions? And another example would be the South African wildfires, where those helicopters had to drop 2 tons of water into that readiness, availability aspects of when you do a search and rescue from a regulator side of things. That was my question, if this incorporates it, and including even unmanned remote systems that can go in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Do you have any other questions so that we can answer any other question related to the same, or I just answer this one straight away? Okay. To answer, Professor, is that I said that search and rescue is categorized into 2. There are those ones which are done in the land, and the other one which is done in the water bodies. That is the ocean and the lakes. So the entity, what is saying here is that we have entities which have equipments which can be used for the purpose of search and rescue. So in the making of these regulations, there are agencies which are supposed to participate in search and rescue operations, and these are listed through what we call normally the letters of agreements, the MOUs, but which also included the military. And of course, as you know, in Kenya, the procedures for obtaining military arrangements or agreements is not, actually the military responsibility is the principle number 1 after providing the security of the state. So without any memorandum of understanding, they are automatically participants for the search and rescue. Likewise to other agencies like the Kenya Police. You know, the essence of search and rescue is to save persons. It's not even actually, and also to safeguard the equipment where in case of fires. So the quick response of identifying the position and the location of a crash or any incident or that an aircraft has got lost is to save the equipment, to save the persons on board the equipment. So by use of any equipments like the ones you've said, that helicopters actually are the key equipments which can be easily be used to assess in areas where it is not possible to get by other means. And that's why again the National Police Service also is part of these elements, because they are spread all over the country, and they are the first persons to always arrive in any scene where there is an incident or accident or an aircraft has just landed, or make a landing or a post landing somewhere without the knowledge of, let's say, the air traffic services or their navigation service providers. Such information is normally welcomed. The use of equipments like to use for fire, to equipments which are used to, let's say, for water or using equipments, those are actually like the advances with technology which states now can adopt, like the use of remotely piloted equipment or the unmanned aircraft system. Those are technologies which are being used nowadays to aid in the search and rescue activities. I hope I have answered your question. Yeah. Any other? Timothy.
Thank you. To add on to what you have said, and to answer the professor, when you have a search and rescue exercise, you want to go and rescue people, you do not send a Boeing 747 there. You send whatever is appropriate, because we have trained search and rescue mission coordinators. I hope that's clear. Thank you. Now, I go back to the point I had in the morning, whereby in the preamble, you are saying the cabinet secretary responsible for aviation makes the following regulations. But then, in the final draft, you go and spoil it again by putting in cabinet secretary for transport, infrastructure, housing, and in the next few months, all that may change. So I propose we leave it as it was, cabinet secretary responsible for aviation for the time being, as it is in the Civil Aviation Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timothy Kinywa, for your comments. What actually, on the signing of this document, you know, the document has to be signed in the long run by the CS, or the cabinet secretary in charge of aviation. However, you know, in some subjects, sometimes those titles are important. As it was answered by our legal department, it is common in all our regulations in that when the regulations have been deliberated, it has a date of which the cabinet secretary signs those this document into law, and as such, that resulted into the change of these regulations to suit the title for the cabinet secretary at that time, which is responsible for civil aviation. And even the name of the person, which is the name of the cabinet secretary, is also appended to it. And that is common in all our regulations. However, as it was answered in the morning, that it is something we are going to look into, because initially, in all our regulations, it has always been saying that the cabinet secretary is responsible for civil aviation. Of course, or aviation matters. It is, but your sentiments has been considered, and I hope it will be considered as what we had addressed in the earlier regulations. And also in all these regulations, it is a common standard, but which it will be done by our legal department. Any other question? Or if there is no any other question, I hand over to my colleague Caroline for article information regulations.
Good afternoon. My name is Caroline Beatty, AIS Inspector. I'm taking you through Aeronautical Information Service Regulations. In the matrix, we have some changes in regulation number 2, which is basically on interpretations. And all of that part of regulation number 2, all changes relate to deletion of ISO referencing, ISO 19110. So everything under regulation number 2 is about that part. Then we move to regulation number 6. We had used World Geodetic System 84. So there was a recommendation from the industry that once we use it for the first time, in subsequent use, we can just use the abbreviation WGS 84. Regulation number 6, sub-regulation C part, we had a missing requirement which was proposed by our stakeholders and we incorporated. So that was a new insertion in our regulations. Regulation number 7, we had used the full name mean sea level. So stakeholders advised that in the subsequent use we use MSL instead of repeating the whole thing. Regulation number 9. There was this part in Annex 15, Clause 131, which we had omitted with the assumption that our aeronautical information publications are usually in English, and the requirement in that part is that we should include English text for those parts expressed in plain language on the aeronautical information products intended for international distribution. We considered that and we incorporated it in our regulations. 9 Bravo, there was this part whereby we had indicated name of place instead of exactly whatever appears in the annex as place names. So it was just an issue of paraphrasing. We considered and we incorporated that. 9C, the industry thought that we should have omitted this part, which is use of units of measurement in origination, processing, distribution of aeronautical data and information consistent with tables contained in units of measurements regulations. Our stakeholders thought that it was nice that we omit that part because in the annex it's a recommendation. However, some recommended practices that add value to our services, we've incorporated them as part of our regulations. So we retained the text as it was. Regulation number 12, exchange, there was a request that we delete shall be addressed, which was appearing, a text that was appearing at the end of the regulation. That one we did, we deleted the part. Regulation number 19, we were to strike out something that was indicating raw data. We only struck the part raw and then we replaced it with aeronautical data. Regulation number 32, we had a proposal that we include some requirements in the PANS AIM, from the PANS AIM document, that is Doc 10066. We did, this was a requirement for color coding AICs, which we did, we included the proposal. There was this, regulation number 33. The stakeholders had an issue with the type of charts that we had said that should be provided. And according to whoever gave the recommendations, quoted a part of a clause in Annex 15. That was clause 5.2.5.3, which according to him or her thought that we should not have some of the charts that is indicated in our regulations. However, there is a requirement in 5 Annex 15, Clause 5.2.5.1, which requires us to have all those charts. So in this case, we didn't consider that request, and we retained the requirement as it is. Regulation number 41. There was the requirement said that aeronautical products shall be made available on the most expeditious means. So someone indicated that they wanted to use internet, that we should include some text in from Annex 15, some clause from Annex 15. However, we felt that whatever we've indicated, that the information shall be promulgated, the information shall be distributed using the fastest means. If, in your opinion, the internet is the most expeditious means to distribute this information, we don't have any problem with that, and we thought that whatever we had indicated in the regulations was sufficient, so we didn't change anything in that. And then the last one was regulation number 48, whereby we had a proposal to include some clauses from PANS AIM Doc 1006, which we did. And with that, I submit. Any questions? Yes.
Not a question. Regulation 32 sub part 2. There's a grammatical typo. Maybe that can be corrected.
Regulation number 32?
Sub part 2.
Okay. 32? Do we have sub part 2?
Yes.
Number 32, the only thing we changed, sub part 2 in the main,
the main
regulations,
text. Yeah?
Yeah, we'll take note of that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other question? Okay. Thank you. Oh, someone has a question here.
Githe Moneki is my name. I can see there you indicated that there's a section, I can't recall the actual regulation, where you indicated that the internet is the fastest means of distribution. Is there any other provision for a backup, just in case? Because yes, you indicate that the internet is the fastest, but is there any other alternative means of distribution apart from that, just for backup purposes? Because it's always good to have the redundancy.
Okay, what the regulation says is that aeronautical information service provider shall provide aeronautical information products using the fastest means. So the question from the stakeholder was, can we use internet? Which is okay with us. We don't have a problem as long as it is your fastest. They normally use mailing services. They can mail the CDs or the flash disk, anything they want. But if you have internet, would be the fastest means. So we don't have a problem with any service provider who will opt to use internet.
Maybe, Caroline, maybe in addition to that, I think it should be appreciated. Thanks for the question. It should be appreciated also that the aeronautical information as packaged by the authority at the moment is offered through the electronic AIP, which you can be able to download and have it in your local system. You can access it online. We also have guidelines. There's a specific document that gives guidance to the authority in terms of dissemination of information. So basically, even the utilization of various systems that facilitate exchange of aeronautical information have taken this into consideration, and even The online services that are provided have redundancies from the technical arm of the authority and having parallel lines that are able to sustain communication. So that has already been addressed by the authority in terms of data sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we have any other questions so that we can move on to the next? Good. In the absence of any other question, it's now 1:15. I would like to propose that we go for lunch and reconvene exactly at 2 o'clock, where we have a series of regulations to consider, including airworthiness regulations, operation of aircraft, commercial.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of Ask Your Aviator series. My name is Christopher Igala Kigalo, a Senior Air Transport Officer at Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Today on Ask Your Aviator series, we are going to take you through one of the functions of the Civil Aviation Authority, which involves facilitation of air transport. In facilitation of air transport as provided internationally by International Civil Aviation Organization and KCAA as the oversight body in Kenya, we have to ensure that passengers and shippers are properly facilitated at the airport. In doing this, we involve several agencies, both public and private. An example of agencies in the private sector includes the airlines, ground handling agencies, catering services, taxi services, and financial institutions. Public bodies involve Kenya Revenue Authority, Customs Department, Immigration Department. We have the Plant Health Inspectorate Department, Directorate of Livestock, the Nuclear Authority, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, among others. So all these agencies have to coordinate in order to facilitate a passenger. So join me today as we go through the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to show you how an international passenger is facilitated on departure and the seamless coordination between all the agencies. Thank you, and let's start our journey. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning to you. We are here today going through the airport. You may introduce yourself and tell us who you are, the organization you work for, and the role you play at the airport.
My name is Benjamin Murkomen. I'm the head of Hotel Services, KCAA. And the key role that we do as Hotel Services is to ensure that we put in place preventative measures in case of any emergency here at the airport, and ensure that we attend to those medical emergencies as soon as possible without interfering with travel and business in this airport.
How do you handle, on a normal day, how do you handle passengers who pass through your point of operation?
As you can see, we are now here at the Terminal 1A. We have new procedures based on the new protocols of COVID-19.
Yes.
Number one, before a traveler exits through our airport, we must screen them based on the PCR certificate that they're presenting here at the counter. And I have my officers here who are ready to receive our travelers.
Yes.
So what happens, the passenger arrives, he presents or she presents our certificates from approved laboratories in Kenya. We have 43 approved labs that test COVID-19 certificates. So once they present themselves here, we verify they have a trusted traveler's code that they must look at those certificates. We have a digital system that is linked to the laboratory. So once a traveler comes, they present a TT code in soft copy or based on the Banabio system that we have, whether it is a genuine one or not. Once they enter into the tablet, it will produce the certificate and will compare with your passport and the document that was presented from the lab. When it matches, we release you, you continue with your journey.
There's a much difference between the operations now and before COVID-19. Can you simply explain to us the differences that you have now and how you are doing things before COVID came around?
Absolutely. We have new procedures now because of COVID-19. There is the new norm currently, and the new norm is we must sanitize our hands, social distance the way we are now.
I hope this is more than
1.5 meters. Yes. And ensure that you are tested before you travel, because we want to ensure that the risk of COVID-19 is reduced as you travel terminal, so that at least we are sure that those who are traveling have been screened. They have the right documentation before they do that. So they have to arrive here early as opposed to the times when we are not having COVID-19.
Now, we already have a vaccine that arrived in Kenya recently. After Kenyans have been vaccinated and the whole travel between now and after we've gotten the vaccine.
As a country, we are really excited to use for our frontline health workers. What will happen now is that it will give our travelers that confidence that at least they are being given a preventative measure, so that at least they are aware that when there is the virus is there, it will reduce the risk of the virulence of that virus. So what will happen now is that my front health workers will get the inoculation and we'll go to the general public. That now, what will happen to this traveler is that there will be that confidence that they have a preventative measure in themselves. It will give them immunity for a certain period of time. But that means also we will not leave the other precautionary measures. They must observe social distance, put on the masks, and wash their hands as they travel through our air.
So COVID-19, what action will you take as public health?
Yeah, in our protocols, once you have a positive case arrive, what will happen is that we have to isolate that person. We have presented himself or herself with a positive certificate. Then we contact our counterparts in Nairobi Metropolitan Services, this person, for further management. So we will to travel with a positive negative. So we must confirm by ensuring that